Welcome to Parenthood Bites, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of 3 incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 20 of Parenthood Bites. We're here today with Lauren Fischetti, who is the Director of B2B Marketing at Affirm and is now currently a life and career coach living in the Bay Area. Hi Lauren, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Is it really rainy over there?
It was raining like crazy this morning, but it's cleared up a little bit. So,
A little better,
yeah,
right?
yeah. How about you?
Yeah, same here. It's a little bit nicer now. So I'm like, okay, it's time to walk my dog and
Yes,
take the kids outside. My son had an
yes.
umbrella with him, but we found out it had a big hole in the middle.
Oh, God.
So we had to have him bring another umbrella.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
today he's
man.
lugging like 2 umbrellas, one with a hole and then one that's too big for him. So
That's so cute. I'm just impressed that he's using an umbrella at all. We had like a very treacherous rainy daycare drop off this morning, and then on the way home I saw a mom carrying an umbrella and her little tiny child walking across the street holding an umbrella, and I was impressed.
it's hard to keep them dry, right? It's
Yeah,
like they
yeah,
can barely hold it up, and then when you hold an umbrella, it barely covers them. It's
yeah, yeah. I feel like rain is just this huge curveball that, like, without kids is annoying, but I feel like with kids, you're just like, oh God, this is impossible.
yeah, totally. So how many kids do you have, and what are their ages?
I have 2 kids. Our oldest son is almost 4, and our younger one is a year and a half.
That's such a cute age. Are they both in daycare?
The older one is in daycare. The younger one is actually at home with a nanny. We had tried, he will eventually go to that daycare. We tried starting him about a year ago in the daycare. And I think last year was just a terrible year for germs. And he was just like decimated by illness. And after a few months of him being home, like more than 50% of the time, we just decided it wasn't fair for him. It wasn't working for us. So,
And it just works out better, right? Because
yeah,
they're missing most of daycare anyways when they're always
yeah,
sick. And then once they get better, they get sick again because someone
yeah.
else is bringing something in.
Totally, totally. I was like, I don't even know if he's gaining immunity because it just felt like he kept just getting sick while he was still sick, and felt so bad for him.
Yeah, of course. And then we're still paying for daycare when they're sick. So that's the
Yes,
other
yes,
side of it.
exactly. I was like, I'm paying someone else so that I can watch my child.
Right, right. Or if you need a nanny or something, then you're double paying for,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
I remember those days. It was always
Yeah.
tough because I always wanted to send them, but at the same time, I'm like, ugh, the trade-off, you know?
Oh, totally, totally. That it's like this awful feeling where you're like, I can't really tell how sick you are because you can't quite communicate it. I
Yes.
want to send you to daycare, but I don't, like, if you're genuinely sick, I want to like have you rest and care for you, but it's just, yeah. How old are your kids?
My kids are 13, 11, and 8. So we've gotten out of that phase, but I tell you those first years because there was always someone in daycare, always someone in preschool because they're so close in age that I feel like the first maybe like 6 or 7 years someone was just always sick.
Yes,
It
yes.
was like when one kid's done, then the next kid and then the adults and then we'd have to, right? You stay home from work to take care of them. And then the next few days, you're
Yeah,
sick.
yeah,
And then it cycles over
yeah,
again. And so
yeah.
when I hear you talking about that, I'm just like, oh gosh, it totally
Flashbacks.
resonates. Yeah, it's all a blur at this point. So before coaching, you were a director B2B marketing at Affirm. So
Yes.
I was curious, what brought you to tech and how many years were you in tech?
Yeah. what brought me to tech, I think, was a few things. Before working in tech, I was doing all different kinds of jobs, somewhat related to consumer finance. And so, what brought me to tech was an interest in the ways that technology could be used to improve people's like relationship with their money. So kind of going from a world where it was just like super old fashioned, scary banks to like people being able to just have more access to different types of ways of like using their money and different types of products and all of that. And so that appealed to me kind of like from afar for years. And then I think the other big thing was just feeling like wanting the opportunity to work in sort of like a faster paced environment where, rather than seeing a challenge or a problem and then spending like a year or two trying to convince people that we should do something about it. And then this whole process of like planning and prioritization and blah, 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 just like being in an environment where I could be like, that looks broken. I'm going to go fix it, or like there's a better way to do this, and so I'm going to go do it. So I think it was those kind of two things: the working style, and then just being interested in kind of like the explosion, I guess, of fintech that's going
Yeah, I
on.
hear that. I was also at a fintech company, Marquetta, and they partnered with
Mm-hmm.
Affirm.
Yeah,
Which when you said Affirm,
yeah,
I was like, oh yeah, we
yeah, yeah,
worked with
yeah,
Affirm.
yeah.
So, did you have your kids when you were working at Affirm?
I had my first son while I was working at a firm.
And how was the parental leave like?
The parental leave was great, which is one of the things I didn't think about going into tech, but I know is often one of the benefits. So I was very grateful for that. I think it's gotten even better since I was there, but I think at the time it was, I had 16 weeks paid leave, and then I ended up taking, I think, 2 extra weeks of unpaid leave at the end. Or maybe it was 14, and I think it was 16, and then I took 2 extra weeks at the end.
That's nice that they had that flexibility
Yeah.
to take the additional 2 weeks.
Yes. Yeah.
And was it how was it transitioning back to work after your parental leave?
It was interesting because I went out on leave a few weeks before COVID hit. I had my son, and then like 2 or 3 weeks later, the world went into lockdown. And so everything about returning was so strange that it was almost like hard to, I was like, what about it is being a parent? What about it is being in this remote world for the first time? So in some ways I was super grateful to not have to deal with like figuring out how to like rush to the office, worrying about pumping in the office, all of that stuff. But it was also a very strange way to return to work because it's like, well, here I am. I'm back sitting in my kid's bedroom at a random makeshift desk that I just pulled together.
Yeah, it's like returning to the same place yet not, right?
Yeah.
It's like a whole different culture
Yeah.
shift. Yeah, that's tough, especially since now you have this child too. So even that, right? That alone
Yeah.
is a huge change. And then in
Yes.
addition to a whole different work
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So when you had your second child, did you already leave a firm? What was the parental leave like there?
I had already left a firm and I was actually not working at the time. So I had left a firm a little bit over 2 years ago now, just to like, kind of like your typical, I was feeling really burnt out, not sure what I wanted to do with myself, and feeling like I couldn't figure it out in that job, having a kid, like just feeling like I didn't have the time or headspace to figure it out. And so I ended up getting pregnant like shortly after leaving. And so I had like worked with a coach and figured out that I wanted to become a coach, which I kind of already knew, but I think I just hadn't fully allowed myself to admit it. But then my son was born, and so I was not working. I hadn't started my business yet, so it was kind of it was nice in some ways because I wasn't really on leave. I just was like, okay, I want to be able to care for my son for X number of months before starting this thing. But it also felt strange, I think, because I felt like I was a little bit in kind of like a no man's land. I was like, am I on maternity leave? Am I just I'm just watching my child, I guess that's what I'm doing. But like knowing I wanted to start something at some point after that.
Yeah, it's like new beginnings,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I was pretty curious about like, because I think I'm kind of in a similar path in my life. So I was kind of curious about how you made that decision to switch from, being in tech, going back to finding a job there versus going full time into coaching, which I
Yeah.
also find is a very fulfilling role.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first like light bulb, I guess, about coaching was while I was at Affirm. I was in some leadership training, and one of the exercises was to write your personal, or I guess professional personal brand. And a lot of people's were like, I'm a recruiter who loves helping people connect with the right company, or I'm a marketer and I love finding the right customers. And mine was all about loving to lead my team and mentor and guide and coach people in general. And that was kind of the first light bulb those were the parts of my job that I really loved the most. And so I just kind of sat with that. So I was like, okay, like that's good to know. I did start taking some coaching classes through one of the coaching schools while I was still at Affirm. I think I wanted, when I left Affirm, to figure out some other more like traditional career path, just because that felt like, I think because it felt easier and more like clear. Like, what do you do? Okay, I figure out some other path. I go find a job, and then I keep doing what I'm doing right now. And so after a few months of soul searching, I ended up finding my own coach, because I was like, okay, just kind of like, it's been great to take a break and do pottery classes, but I'm not actually figuring anything out here. Um, and I worked with him for several weeks and months. And I think I ultimately landed on like, hey, I keep coming back to this as something that I'm really interested in and curious about. And so why not? Like I said, I think I was hoping some typical path would present itself, and no typical path presented itself. And I kept on being drawn back to coaching. And so I figured it was at least time to give it a try.
I love that. I love that you followed kind of where your passion lied, because it's hard and it takes a lot of courage to do that, especially
Yeah.
when it's like there's the easier path, right? Let me go
Yeah.
and do a few interviews are not easy by any means, but like going to look
Yeah.
for a role that I've been doing, that's like the easier path. But then it's
Yes.
hard to start your own business and look for clients and do
Yeah.
something that you've not done before. That takes a
Yes.
lot of courage to do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, yeah, like you said, it's the path, the known path. Even if it's not easy, to your point, like interviewing and finding jobs is not easy, but it's just known, I think, which feels different.
Yeah. So during this time while you were, taking classes and starting your coaching practice and all of that, what did you do for childcare? Because you have a toddler and a newborn, which is another job in itself.
Yeah. So the toddler was in daycare, and he stayed in his daycare. And then when the new baby was born, I was caring for him for the first 6 months. And so during that time, I was kind of just trying to do what I could on the side, and just accepting that I wasn't going to truly be able to start anything. And so one of the things I knew I really wanted to do just personally, because I enjoy it, but like as part of my coaching business, was to write online just about some of, different coaching topics and things like that. And so I did, because that was something I could do kind of at any time. I did take some classes for that and just start getting comfortable with it and practicing, and kind of thinking through what types of clients do I want to work with? What type of coaching do I want to do? Kind of like all of the prep that I could do, like short of talking to people on the phone, because that just felt too hard to like, with a super young
Yeah.
baby, there's nothing predictable. So I was like, I'm not going to do
Yeah.
anything that requires me to show up anywhere at a specific time. And then right when he started his fateful attempt at daycare, I finished the last handful of coaching classes and then just started from there. And then, yeah, like during those early few months when he was getting sick all the time, it was just stops and starts with watching him and taking care of my sick baby.
Wow, you really I think you manage your time really well there because it's like when the kid is asleep or something, you really only get half an hour, 40 minutes or 20 minutes even, right? So you took that
Yeah.
time to really just focus on some heads down stuff and then once they were
Yeah.
both in daycare, then you started
Yeah.
to have phone calls and things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think it was helpful also that it was my second kid. I think for my first maternity leave, I was like, in hindsight, it's like so obvious, but I was so shocked by how little time I had and how it was like you said, it's like you have 20 minutes now. Do you like shower or eat or like sit there and do nothing? Because that sounds nice too.
That's what
And
you
so I
really
think,
want to do?
right. We spend the first 10 minutes making sure, like, is the child actually asleep? Okay, they're
Right.
asleep. Now they're awake. But yes, I think for my second son, I kind of like I knew what to expect. So I didn't have, I had realistic expectations of how much time I would have and how much energy and all of that.
Yeah. Isn't it fascinating how like after the first kid, we feel more comfortable, more like, okay, we know exactly how this is going to go. Sure, there's some unknowns, but we're
Yeah.
prepared and we adapt so much quicker.
Yeah. 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 Well, and you know why it was so hard the first time around, but you're like, this isn't as hard as I thought it
Yeah.
was then.
Cuz now you know like 5 minutes really means 3 minutes
Right.
and like
Right.
10 minutes you really just have 5 minutes. So now you know
Yeah.
kind of what to
Yeah.
expect,
Yeah.
right? So are both of them in daycare now?
The younger one still has a nanny until we're trying to make it through this winter season because we just figured why tempt fate twice.
Yeah.
And then in the spring he'll start at daycare.
Especially in the winter time, right? That's when
Yeah.
things are definitely going around.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And he like I think also just recognizing like yes, they're both our child, but they're two different people. I think his immune system is just different. He gets ear infections. My older son never gets them. So it's just like, it's just a different guy. He needs a different situation.
Yeah, I understand that. So, what is your day to day routine like with both of them now?
Yeah. The day to day routine is in the morning chaos of getting ready with the kids. Our older one usually wakes up first. We have a smoothie that we have every single day. So we make that, blah, blah, blah. Try to get ready as quickly as we can for work. But as I'm sure you know, it takes forever with the four of us. And then drop the older one off at daycare. If my husband's going into the office, I'll take both of them with me, come home with the younger one, and then the nanny gets here. And then I have my full day. It's nice having him home because I enjoy getting to see him throughout the day. And then again, if my husband's in the office, I'll usually go home and take the younger one once the nanny leaves. I'll take him to get the older one from daycare. Depending on timing, I'll either try and cook dinner before we go or once we get back. Yeah, and then it's just like the fun of dinner time, bedtime, which for my older son has like extended into infinity, it feels like. um, and then, yeah, like depending on how the day went or how the energy levels, I'll catch up on a little bit of work before bed. But did I answer the question? It was just the routine around the
Yeah,
with
just
the
kind
kids,
of
right?
around like you mentioned, like pick up, drop off, and it's always interesting to hear like there is a baseline of what we do, but then we always shift things depending on the kids. Like you said,
Yeah.
depending on their energy level,
Yep.
depending on the time you have. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it'll be really easy to make dinner. Sometimes it's like,
Yes.
nope, not today.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
I always, am interested to hear how what parents do to make it work because,
Yeah.
there's some tips in there that I think other parents can pick up from.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And I'm trying to. The only other like variables I think when my husband is home and works from home, he works from home like 2 days a week. Then we'll usually like in the morning we still both go to daycare just because we're like, oh, it's nice to walk. It's a walk. We walk, which is really nice. It's like a 10-minute walk, and then at night usually we'll split up, and one of us does dinner and the other one does pick up and takes the little one also, because otherwise, as I'm sure you know, you cannot cook dinner very reliably with a 1.5-year-old running around.
Yeah. I'm like, here's some pots and pans, go nuts. And then they'll go nuts for like 5 minutes and then they're bored. And I'm like,
Right.
here's a cracker. And then next thing I know, there's crumbs everywhere, all over
Yes.
their hair
Yes.
and everywhere. So I get it. When you have someone else, you just find that it's just so much easier, right? Where you can
Yes.
divide the tasks.
Yeah.
And then when it falls back all on you, it's like, oh gosh, this was really hard. How did I do it the
Yeah.
other day?
Totally. And I feel like that's the big change with 2 kids or more versus 1, because I feel like we do try and split things as much as we can, or we have like a system. But then when, one person has like after work plans or needs to like head out for a dinner or out of town or something, you're like, I know I can do this, but it requires this like level of precision that's just like,
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to like really plan it out, right? And you have to account for things are not going to go the way you plan, but then you
right,
got to just
right.
adjust.
Yeah. And that's what I need to get better and better at, is just like remembering that the 2 kids are not, number 1, they're not robots. Number 2, they're not adults. And so crazy things are going to happen every morning, every night. And you just have to account for that. And it's not going to go as planned, but that's okay.
Yeah. And like you said, they're very different too. It's like we
Yes.
raise them the same, but they're very different. So what works for one is
Yes.
going to be totally
Yes.
like my
Yes.
kids. If I ask them, what do you want for dinner? I'm never going to get the same answer ever. It's always something different. And then we have to have this like 10-minute conversation where I'm trying to convince them. And then finally I'm just like, you're just going to eat what I give you. Okay.
Yeah.
Like majority rules. If 2 of you want something, the third one is going to eat
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Totally. I know. I'm definitely trying to get out of like I feel like we're in the phase of making like up to 3 dinners per night sometimes, because it's just like the adults want to eat some semi-adult food. The
Yeah.
middle kid, the older kid has his preferences. The younger kid like won't. It's like can't be reasoned with. So sometimes I'm
Yeah.
just like, okay, 3 terrible dinners have been cooked. Here you go.
And sometimes it's just easier that way, right? Then you
Yep.
don't have the hassle of the back and forth, the
Yep.
tantrums. That just eat
Yes.
it and let's get ready for bed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. Like on certain days, I think I decide, okay, this is a day where I'm going to make the healthy dinner, make the vegetables. We're all going to eat the same food at the same time. And other days, it's just like, I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to give us a pass. I'm just going to make the easy, unhealthy thing I know you like, and we're just going to be done
Yeah.
with it.
And we deserve those days, you know?
Yes. Yes.
We
Yes.
deserve those
Yeah.
breaks because
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Yeah. I think it was on Monday night, we had like some mac and cheese left. I don't even remember what it was, but I basically said to my husband, I was like, let's just give us a win tonight and just heat this up and not think about it.
Yeah. If they'll eat it, that's a win. That's my thinking. If they'll eat it, they're full. I don't have to worry about it. We're good. So, how has your work life changed since you became a parent?
Yeah. Great question. And I think it like changed in probably 2 different, or maybe many different, but different ways, definitely, when I was at Affirm versus where I am now. I think some of the big changes are, one, just having, when you have so much less time, just really needing to prioritize how you spend your time, both at work and after work. So I think before I had kids, I definitely worked too much and worked, at night, late at night, weekends. And I still did that after I had my first son, but I just had so much less time to do it and less interest in it. And so I think trying to get better at recognizing that there's an infinite amount of work, and yes, there are certain things that need to be done. I didn't get them done during the day and they have to be done tonight, or something urgent actually happened. But otherwise, it's on me to just say, I'm stopping now. I deserve like some time to do something for myself. So that was one big thing. And then I had one other big thing, just like having this other big, huge thing that takes up your time and that you're responsible for. I think it just changed the way I thought about work and the time I spent at work. Kind of like always knowing, like, oh, I might have to take some time off to watch my kid, or
Mhm.
like, what I'm really trying to say and kind of like fumbling over is just thinking about like where in the priority rankings is work, and knowing that like some days it'll be here up higher and some days it'll have to be lower, and just being getting comfortable with like not being able to work as much or as hard as I did, and being like, this is actually okay.
Yeah, I think I know exactly what you're saying, where it's like before kids, you could just focus on work. And
Yeah.
even if you didn't finish it today, you're like, all right, I'll do it over the weekend. I'll do
Yes.
it tonight. And then after kids, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I can't think of that as the next step because over the weekend or tonight, I actually want to just be with my
Right.
kids, you know?
Right.
Even if
Yeah.
there wasn't anything going on, you want to spend that time with the kids. And so it's like being okay with, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this tonight or this weekend. I'm not going to get to it till Monday. And then being okay with that with yourself, right?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And I think it took me a while to be okay with it with myself. And then I think also to like be comfortable putting it out in the world. I even think back to like this handful of times that, someone would put a last minute meeting on your calendar that interfered with when I was supposed to like pick up my kid or something. And because we only had one kid and da da da, I could maybe try and trade with my husband or this and that. And now in hindsight, I'm like, why did I do that? We had open calendars. I clearly had a block that said daycare pickup. So if you schedule something over that time, like, I actually don't care, and I'm not going to attend. But I did attend, and so I think those types of things just like had how do I wished I had been a little bit more comfortable, just like totally owning that side as well.
Yeah, I definitely hear you. Like a lot of the things you're saying resonates with me because I remember thinking that if I didn't make it to that meeting or something, they would view me as being a slacker or not
Yes.
taking work seriously.
Yeah.
But then I think back and I'm like, wait, I need to train them to realize that me picking up my kid is just as important as this meeting, if
Yes.
not more important,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And a lot of times we have that back and forth in our minds and then we ultimately sometimes end up giving into it because we're like we don't want to seem like a bad employee.
Yes, totally. Yeah. I read this really interesting article recently about boundaries. And the thing that stuck out most to me was the author said that the reason we have such a hard time with boundaries is because we think of boundaries as something that someone else has to respect for us versus something that we have to claim for ourselves. And that was like, I feel like that sort of blew my mind a little bit, because, we think of boundaries as like, I put this thing on my calendar or I tell someone this. And in an ideal world, everyone would hear and see those things and be like, yep, I respect you. I respect what you're trying to do here. But people aren't like malicious. It just doesn't happen. And it's on us. It's also on us to kind of like, yeah, to claim those boundaries.
Yeah, and a lot of times they think like, well, you were able to move it last time, why can't you move it this time? you know I've
Right.
heard that where it's like, well, last week you were able to make it, so
Right.
do whatever you did last week. It's
Exactly.
like, no, I tried
Yeah.
to make an exception last
Right.
week.
Right. Like, I really didn't make it work last week. I did show up, but yeah, and I think like one of the things you're just like broadly probably getting at with this podcast is that everybody's situation is different too. And I think, even people who have kids, but they have like a different childcare situation can't understand, like we all can't really understand. We can do our best to understand each other, but all of our situations are so different in terms of the amount of support we have and flexibility and all of that. And so everyone's situation is so different too.
Exactly. That's why I want to talk to as many people as possible because I feel like it'll just help us to hear about all these different experiences and
Yeah.
build more empathy for one another. That way we can support each other that much more.
Yes.
Because I definitely know before I had kids, I viewed things a lot differently than after I had my first kid. And then second
Yeah.
kid, it was different. And then third
Yeah.
kid. So it's like, we keep evolving as the way we're thinking about things too.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I remember going back to work after my first son and being like, oh my God, I was such a jerk in my head, not outwardly, obviously, but I was like such a jerk in my head to working parents. Like I had no idea. I just didn't understand like needing to leave early or be offline or whatever. Like I just had no concept. I think I just hadn't like really sat down to think about it. Well, like, what do you think happens when you're home with your child? They're not like a cat, they're a human.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I had that exact moment because I had a colleague of mine who had, I think her kid was 7 at the time, and I wasn't married, no kids. And she would tell me about how she would wake up at 7 and she didn't get into work until 9:30. And in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, what were you doing between 7 and 9:30? You live like 10 minutes away from work. I can't believe you didn't show
Yeah,
up till
yeah,
now. And I was like, I live an hour away and I showed up at 8:30. And then
yeah,
after I had kids, I was like, oh my God, all the stuff she had to take care of in the
yeah,
morning. Like, no wonder, but I felt
yeah,
so bad. Like, I had no idea because you just don't realize all the things
yeah,
involved. Like you
yeah,
said, even leaving the house, right? You plan to leave at 10. You probably won't leave
yeah.
until 10:15, 10:30. You weren't twiddling your thumbs, but
No,
things
no.
come up.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I mean, we're 4 years into this, and I feel like my husband and I still are like, well, 2.5 hours later, we're just leaving for daycare. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. So, what has been your biggest challenge or struggle when you were a parent in tech or even today?
I think the biggest struggle maybe is something we've kind of touched on from a bunch of different angles, which is just like kind of like accepting life for what it is, and accepting that it does, like, it takes up a ton of your time, and sometimes it feels like really hard to even shower. And like sometimes you want your kid to wake up and be happy and eat their breakfast and put their clothes on and walk out the door, and they're going to do the opposite of that at every turn. And I think, just maybe summing it up, I am a person who likes to control things probably more than is healthy. And everything about being a parent, and then especially a working parent, and when you have two parents working, is completely out of control. um, and so I think just kind of being comfortable with what you can control, what you can't control, and not getting kind of like too bent out of shape when things don't go the way you want them to or think they should go, which is like pretty much all the time.
That's what I was going to say, right? Most of the time it doesn't. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, just having to be okay with that.
I think if you'd asked me like a year or two or even three ago, I probably would have said the hardest thing was just like the time, like just losing, like, I'm a person who likes to do, like, have time by myself and to do different types of like hobbies and exercise and just all different kinds of stuff. And yeah, so I think I would have originally said the time, but I think I've kind of come to peace with that, or to terms with that. I figured out ways to carve time for the things I need into my schedule. I really do like love the time we spend as a family doing things like going to the playground or amusement park or whatever. Things that in the past I would have been like, that's a terrible way to spend a Saturday morning. And so I think, yeah, like I've come to terms with the time thing, and I think it really is just the control thing now.
That's so great, though, that you were able to carve out some time for yourself as well, because I know it takes a long time to even figure out how to do that and then to make time for that. And then the fact that you're able to do that, that's so good for you
Yeah.
mentally and
Yes.
physically.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I realized how important it was while I was watching. I think I was still watching my second kid like a few months after he was born. And I remember this moment walking down the street where I was just like, I had this like realization where I was like, I feel like I have like totally lost my like identity in some ways. And I think it was compounded. It was like new baby, not working, not really sure what was ahead. And so I think it kind of like hit me hard in this moment, just walking down the street. I was like, who am I and what am I doing? And I think that was the realization where I was like, okay, there will always be like some unknowns and whatever with being a parent. But what I do have control of is recognizing the things that are really important to making me feel like me and trying my best to do those and recognizing that I can't do them in the same way I did them before having kids, but I can do them in like a new way. And so, you know, I can't see friends like whenever I feel like it during the week, but I can try and prioritize seeing friends more often than I was doing at that point, which was not at all. Or I can like go back to my book club, or I can try to, figure out how to get exercise back into my schedule. And I think that realization was really important for me, because knowing that I can't do things the same as I did them before, but still that it is important for me to do those things that make me feel like me.
Yeah, that's really neat that you found out new ways to do it so that you can still do those things. So, what are, I know you named a few, but like, what are some of those things that help you relax or unwind?
I think the most important things for me are, I love running. And so I really try to, I think that's one of the lucky things about coaching or having your own business or being more in control of your schedule is, I like right now it would be pretty impossible, I think, for me to exercise outside of work hours. And so I'm able to like, I think when I first started my coaching business, I was like, I don't have any time for any of this. Like I'm starting a new business. I need to be getting like finding as many clients as I can, as fast as I can, and all, put all this pressure on myself. And then my therapist actually was like, did you become a coach so that you could work yourself exactly the same way you did when you were in your like old 9 to 5 job? And I was like, huh, this is an interesting question. And I realized that taking time to go on a run in the morning meant that I came to the rest of the day with much more energy and clarity. I would think of like LinkedIn posts and all different kind of ideas for my business on the run. And so just recognizing that, hey, if I take this time out of the day, it's actually more productive for me than just sitting down at the computer in the morning tired without moving my body at all. So that's one of them. The other big one for me is reading. I read anything, but I really love fiction. And so I'm in a book club in San Francisco that I've been in for several years, and I had just stopped participating. And so I'm back at it. So I read every night before bed, which is super lovely. And I think the other one was I just realized I needed to, I'm not like a have a million friends type of person, but I am like close friendships are really important to me. And so I had just like a handful of friends in the city where I was like, I should try to see them more frequently. And like, it's okay. I feel like once our baby got old enough that it didn't feel like very difficult to leave my husband or for him to leave me with both kids for the whole night, we've both started doing more socializing, which I think has been really nice for both of us.
That's great. Each having that time to go and socialize and be you again, right?
Yes.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier too, but I wanted to see if there was anything you wanted to add in terms of what are some things you do for work-life balance?
Probably the most important thing, which I haven't talked that much about, is just my husband and I try our best to be like a really solid team. And so we we try to split things as best we can while also recognizing like the literal logistics of things. Like if I'm his office is in Oakland and we live in San Francisco, so it's like if he's going there and coming back, like it is kind of hard for a drop off or a pickup or a dinner to be part of that. And so I think doing our best to split things and be fair to each other while also kind of recognizing where it makes sense for somebody else, one of us, to step in more or step away or whatever it might be. I think that is probably the most important thing for me, is just having a partner that's where we're like a team.
Yeah, that's so good to have that support and that backup when you need it for one another. So, what is something that you would tell someone that's going to be a parent or something you wish you knew before you became a parent?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think there's so many things. The one thing that had come to mind when I thought about this before our conversation was my husband's brother actually said this to him. They have 3 kids that are all older than our oldest, and he said, having kids is the end of fun, but the beginning of joy, which I thought was like a perfect way to describe it. And it's not like it's not fun, right? But it's not fun in the way life is when you're just like a solo person doing your thing, but it's so like joyful and meaningful. And then I think probably the other thing I would say is, I was going to say, kind of like back to our conversation before, that, your kid and family stuff might not always feel like it's the most important thing, especially in the context of work, but it like almost always is. But I think for different people it is different. And so maybe more than that, it's like really paying attention to and examining and being thoughtful about what role you want work to play and what role you want family to play, and just making sure that you're trying your best to honor that with all the like endless hard decisions you'll have to make throughout.
That's so important. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of us don't realize until we're years in. Then we're like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, let's think about that. So I think that's definitely really helpful for people to hear. And I love that quote where it's the end of having fun and the beginning of joy, because the more you think about it, the more you're like, that's absolutely right. It is joy, but
Yeah.
then it's not like you're in your 20s fun.
Right. 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 Right.
That
Right.
type of fun.
Right. 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 Right.
And usually that is my last question, but I did want to ask you about your coaching. If
Yeah.
people want to find you for coaching, what type of specific coaching do you do and how would they find you?
Yeah. So I do life and career coaching. Mainly, I'm working with people who are looking to find sort of more purposeful, fulfilling careers. They want to feel sort of more purposeful and fulfilled, I guess, in their careers and their lives. Um, I do work with a lot of parents because I think, especially as you're having kids, you start to kind of rethink like, well, what actually do I want out of work? How does it fit in? I work with a lot of non-parents too, but I think most of the folks I work with are sort of at some inflection point where they're thinking like, okay, what do I actually want out of work? I've been on this path that I've been on for a while, and maybe this isn't quite what I'm looking for. And so working through what you actually really want, and figuring out how to make that happen. And the best way for people to find me is through LinkedIn. So Lauren Fischetti on LinkedIn. I have, yeah, and then you can book an exploratory call with me, or just read some of my posts, see if it resonates with you.
Awesome. And I'll include your name, your LinkedIn link into the show notes when this goes out as well. This will go out on March 4th. And so then people will be able to find you and book that exploratory call.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome. Well, thank you for talking with us today. It was just really, really a pleasure to talk to you and hear your stories. And as you know from my expression and things I've been saying, like a lot of it resonated with me so much. So,
Yeah.
I always love when I have those conversations where I'm like, we share a lot of the same but
Yeah.
different stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Thank you. It was a really fun conversation.
Cool. Thank you so much and hope you have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bites. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbites.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's Chiao, CHIAO, at parenthoodbytes.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbytes.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, take care and stay curious.